knows how to be quiet.
Okay, we're starting to get attendees. 1, 2.
Ashley's so quiet.
You'll want me to shut up when we get started.
Okay, what I don't know, you guys, is if they can hear us.
Am I supposed
right
to
now.
click continue?
I did.
Don't know. I don't know if
Okay.
they can hear us or not, you guys. So
Okay,
just
watch
giving you
what we
that.
say.
This Zoom thing, y'all.
They got a group of spicy women on here, so okay, we're ready to roll.
So we have 5 minutes. We have 16 participants. Hi, we can hear you. So Rebecca did say you can hear you. So hello, Rebecca. How are you?
Hello,
So
Rebecca.
if everybody could just say hello to everyone on the panel, that'd be great. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome to this important conversation. Glad to have you.
Thanks,
Welcome,
Carrie.
welcome.
Hi, TK. We're gonna have this is just us having a conversation.
That's right. And yeah, Ashley, there's only 10 people coming.
Yep.
It's funny. It's okay if people hear. It's funny you say that because I have a friend who's very famous. He speaks all over the place, and he tells himself that's what he tells himself. I can't even believe he gets nervous. He's like big high roller. He tells himself 20 people. That's it. That's all I'm taking. Sometimes it's thousands, and he just tells himself 20.
Gotta stay focused.
I'm going
That's
to
right.
that theory.
I guess this will be a part of the bloopers. The part that we cut from the broadcast when we recorded it. Hi, Joan. Joan Weiss. Harriet is on here.
Hi, Joan.
We cannot hear you, Joan, but we can continue to text us or chat with us. Hi, Joan. So everyone, if you come in, just say hello in the chat so that we can just welcome you all personally. Angela. Hello, Angela.
Angela.
Yes.
Hi, Angela.
We're doing shout outs now until we start officially. So Angela is a part of our TEDx U Street Women team. So thank you so much, Angela, for joining us. So we have David Landers. Hi, David.
Hey,
Arlene.
David.
Hi, Arlene. David. Yes. Hi, David.
Welcome, Dave.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
He's the king and the queendom today.
You have no idea.
He said he's looking forward to this. We're looking forward to this as well. We're just chatting away. It helps us to release some stress. So this is good for everyone. Excellent. So Kimberly, how's the weather there? I mean, Kimberly is outside. Her internet failed. It was Murphy's Law.
I'm at the town clerk, Kim, in the parking lot.
Okay, so David says, looking forward to this. Never too late for an old white man to learn. I love it.
Yay!
I love this guy already.
Yes.
Where are you from, David? Okay, we're waiting.
He's from Vermont.
Hey! See?
He's in your neck of the woods.
I know 3 people from Vermont. Bernie Sanders, Kimberly, and now Dave.
I met him. I met Bernie Sanders.
Did you?
Yes. Also in a parking lot.
That must be the meeting place.
Something.
Excellent.
I had to walk him to his car, actually. He had just spoken at the college where I teach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So as you are, all the participants, as you are joining us, please definitely shoot us a hello message so that we can do a shout out to you. So far we have 27 participants so far. Hi, Bria White. We have Diane. Hi, Linda. No, we can't see participants on the video, unfortunately. We're going to have to figure a way to make that work next time around. This is all of our first time using Zoom. So we have Hillary, we have Julie Williams. Hello, Julie from California.
Yay!
Yay, cool.
Yay. Karen Tucker, we have Kathy Boyle, Kurt Watson, Megan Simmons, Michelle, Nancy, Paula, Rebecca. Rebecca also gave us a shout out earlier. Thank you. Hello, everyone. If you could just shout out where you're from. I know that we have 2 minutes before we start. So I know we have almost 20 states, which is totally awesome for our first webinar. We have California, Connecticut, Colorado, DC, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Indiana, Maryland, of course, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Texas, Utah, Virginia, Washington State, and also Canada.
Vermont.
Oh, we got someone. Hi, I see someone from Utah, Megan.
Yeah.
Hi, folks. Hi, Megan. And Hillary is from New Orleans. We got New Orleans in the house. There you go.
Yeah, that's your home girl.
Ashley.
We have more than one from New Orleans, but she may be the only one living in New Orleans. Yeah.
Toby Horn. Hi, Toby. She's an AAUW member. Hi, Toby, sorry. Trinity. Hi, Trinity. She's also part of our TEDx U Street Women. If you guys
Trinity?
Yes. Okay, so it is 1 o'clock on the nose, and we're going to start. So thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. I wanted to set the foundation for this particular webinar. It means so much to everyone here. And we're going to start it off by showing a 2006 TED Talk by Melanie Hobson entitled Colorblind or Color Brave. So give me a moment while I share the screen.
So it's 2006. My friend Harold Ford calls me. He's running for US Senate in Tennessee. And he says, Melody, I desperately need some national press. Do you have any ideas? So I had an idea. I called a friend who was in New York at one of the most successful media companies in the world. And she said, why don't we host an editorial board lunch for Harold? You come with him. Harold and I arrive in New York. We are in our best suits. We look like shiny new pennies. And we get to the receptionist and we say, we're here for the lunch. She motions for us to follow her. We walk through a series of corridors, and all of a sudden we find ourselves in a stark room, at which point she looks at us and she says, where are your uniforms? Just as this happens, my friend rushes in. The blood drains from her face. There are literally no words, right? And I look at her and I say, now, don't you think we need more than one black person in the US Senate? Now, Harold and I, we still laugh about that story. And in many ways, the moment caught me off guard. But deep, deep down inside, I actually wasn't surprised. And I wasn't surprised because of something my mother taught me about 30 years before. You see, my mother was ruthlessly realistic. I remember one day coming home from a birthday party where I was the only black kid invited. And instead of asking me the normal motherly questions like, did you have fun or how was the cake? My mother looked at me and she said, how did they treat you? I was 7. I did not understand. I mean, why would anyone treat me differently? But she knew. And she looked me right in the eye and she said, they will not always treat you well. Now, race is one of those topics in America that makes people extraordinarily uncomfortable. You bring it up at a dinner party or in a workplace environment, it is literally the conversational equivalent of touching the third rail. There is shock, followed by a long silence. And even coming here today, I told some friends and colleagues that I plan to talk about race, and they warned me. They told me, don't do it. There'd be huge risks in me talking about this topic, that people might think I'm a militant black woman and I would ruin my career. And I have to tell you, I actually for a moment was a bit afraid. Then I realized the first step to solving any problem is to not hide from it. And the first step to any form of action is awareness. And so I decided to actually talk about race. And I decided that if I came here and shared with you some of my experiences, that maybe we could all be a little less anxious and a little more bold in our conversations about race. Now, I know there are people out there who will say that the election of Barack Obama meant that it was the end of racial discrimination for all eternity, right? But I work in the investment business, and we have a saying, the numbers do not lie. And here, there are significant, quantifiable racial disparities that cannot be ignored in household wealth, household income, job opportunities, healthcare. One example from corporate America. Even though white men make up just 30% of the US population, they hold 70% of all corporate board seats. Of this Fortune 250, there are only 7 CEOs that are minorities. And of the thousands of publicly traded companies today, thousands, only 2 are chaired by black women. And you're looking at one of them, the same one who not too long ago was nearly mistaken for kitchen help. So that is a fact. Now, I have this thought experience that I play with myself, experiment, when I say, imagine if I walked you into a room and it was of a major corporation like ExxonMobil, and every single person around the boardroom were black, you would think that were weird. But if I walked you into a Fortune 500 company and every around the table is a white male, when will it be that we think that's weird too? And I know how we got here. I know how we got here. You know, there was institutionalized and one time legalized discrimination in our country. There's no question about it. But I still, as I sort of grapple with this issue, my mother's question hangs in the air for me. How did they treat you? No, I do not raise this issue to complain or in any way elicit any kind of sympathy. I have succeeded in my life beyond my wildest expectations. And I've been treated well by people of all races more often than I have not. I tell the uniform story because it happened. I cite those statistics around corporate board diversity because they are real. And I stand here today talking about this issue of racial discrimination because I believe it threatens to rob another generation of all the opportunities that all of us want for all of our children, no matter what their color or where they come from. And I think it also threatens to hold back businesses. You see, researchers have coined this term color blindness to describe a learned behavior where we pretend that we don't notice race. If you happen to be surrounded by a bunch of people who look like you, that's purely accidental. Now, color blindness, in my view, doesn't mean that there's no racial discrimination and there's fairness. It doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't ensure it. In my view, colorblindness is very dangerous because it means we're ignoring the problem. There was a corporate study that said that instead of avoiding race, the really smart corporations actually deal with it head on. They actually recognize that embracing diversity means recognizing all races, including the majority one. But I'll be the first one to tell you, this subject matter can be hard, awkward, uncomfortable, but that's kind of the point. In the spirit of debunking racial stereotypes, the one that black people don't like to swim, I'm going to tell you how much I love to swim. I love to swim so much that as an adult, I swim with a coach. And one day my coach had me do a drill where I had to swim to one end of a 25-meter pool without taking a breath. And every single time I failed, I had to start over. And I failed a lot. By the end, I got it, but I got out of the pool, I was exasperated and tired and annoyed. And I said, why are we doing breath-holding exercises? And my coach looked at me and he said, Melody, that was not a breath-holding exercise. That drill was to make you comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's how most of us spend our days. If we can learn to deal with our discomfort and just relax into it, we'll have a better life. So I think it's time for us to be comfortable with the uncomfortable conversation about race. Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, male, female, all of us. If we truly believe in equal rights and equal opportunity in America, I think we have to have real conversations about this issue. We cannot afford to be colorblind. We have to be color brave. We have to be willing, as teachers and parents and entrepreneurs and scientists, we have to be willing to have proactive conversations about race with honesty and understanding and courage. Not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the smart thing to do. Because our businesses and our products and our science, our research, all of that will be better with greater diversity. Now, my favorite example of color bravery is a guy named John Skipper. He runs ESPN. He's a North Carolina native, quintessential Southern gentleman, white. He joined ESPN, which already had a culture of inclusion and diversity, but he took it up a notch. He demanded that every open position have a diverse slate of candidates. Now, he says the senior people in the beginning bristled, and they would come to him and say, do you want me to hire the minority, or do you want me to hire the best person for the job? And Skipper says his answers were always the same, yes. And by saying yes to diversity, I honestly believe that ESPN is the most valuable cable franchise in the world. I think that's a part of the secret sauce. Now, I can tell you in my own industry, at Ariel Investments, we actually view our diversity as a competitive advantage. And that advantage can extend way beyond business. There's a guy named Scott Page at the University of Michigan. He's the first person to develop a mathematical calculation for diversity. He says if you're trying to solve a really hard problem, really hard, that you should have a diverse group of people, including those with diverse intellects. The example that he gives is the smallpox epidemic. When it was ravaging Europe, they brought together all these scientists and they were stumped. And the beginnings of the cure to the disease came from the most unlikely source, a dairy farmer. A dairy farmer who noticed that the milkmaids were not getting smallpox. And the smallpox vaccination is bovine-based because of that dairy farmer. Now, I'm sure you're sitting here and you're saying, I don't run a cable company. I don't run an investment firm. I am not a dairy farmer. What can I do? And I'm telling you, you can be color brave. If you're a part of a hiring process or an admissions process, you can be color brave. If you are trying to solve a really hard problem, you can speak up and be color brave. Now, I know people will say, but that doesn't add up to a lot. But I'm actually asking you to do something really simple. Observe your environment. At work, at school, at home. I'm asking you to look at the people around you purposefully and intentionally. Invite people into your life who don't look like you, don't think like you, don't act like you, don't come from where you come from. And you might find that they will challenge your assumptions and make you grow as a person. You might get powerful new insights from these individuals. Or, like my husband who happens to be white, you might learn that black people, men, women, children, we use body lotion every single day. Now, I also think that this is very important so that the next generation really understands that this progress will help them because they're expecting us to be great role models. Now, I told you my mother, she was ruthlessly realistic. She was an unbelievable role model. She was the kind of person who got to be the way she was because she was a single mom with 6 kids in Chicago. She was in the real estate business where she worked extraordinarily hard, but oftentimes had a hard time making ends meet. And that meant sometimes we got our phone disconnected or our lights turned off or we got evicted. And when we got evicted, sometimes we lived in these small apartments that she owned, sometimes in only 1 or 2 rooms because they weren't completed. And we would heat our bath water on hot plates. But she never gave up hope, ever. And she never allowed us to give up hope either. This brutal pragmatism that she had, I mean, I was 4 and she told me, Mommy is Santa. She was this brutal pragmatism. She taught me so many lessons, but the most important lesson was that Every single day she told me, Melody, you can be anything, anything. And because of those words, I would wake up at the crack of dawn. And because of those words, I would love school more than anything. And because of those words, when I was on a bus going to school, I dreamed the biggest dreams. And it's because of those words that I stand here right now, full of passion, asking you to be brave for the kids who are dreaming those dreams today. You see, I want them to look at a CEO on television and say, I can be like her, or he looks like me. And I want them to know that anything is possible, that they can achieve the highest level that they ever imagine, that they will be welcome in any corporate boardroom, or they can lead any company. You see this idea of being the land of the free and the home of the brave? It's woven into the fabric of America. America, when we have a challenge, we take it head on. We don't shrink away from it. We take a stand. We show courage. So right now, what I'm asking you to do, I'm asking you to show courage. I'm asking you to be bold. As business leaders, I'm asking you not to leave anything on the table. As citizens, I'm asking you not to leave any child behind. I'm asking you not to be colorblind, but to be color brave, so that every child knows that their future matters and their dreams are possible. Thank you.
So I'm going to start off by repeating the last few words of Ms. Hutchison. She says, you see, this idea of being the land of the free and home of the brave, it's woven into the fabric of America. America, when we have a challenge, we take it head on. We don't shrink away. We take a stand and we show courage. So right now I'm asking you to show courage. I'm asking you to be bold. As business leaders, I'm asking you not to leave anything on the table. As citizens, I'm asking you not to leave any child behind. I'm asking you not to be colorblind, but to be color brave, so that every child knows that their future matters and that their dreams are possible. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kim Webster, and I am the Washington, D.C. branch president of the American Association of University of Women, also known as AAUW. AAUW is a membership-driven organization whose mission is to advocate equality for women and girls through advocacy, education, philanthropy, and research. Our branch was recognized as the association's first branch on October 25th, 1884. We are also proud of the fact that our branch was responsible for racially integrating AAUW in 1954, thanks to the leadership of Alice Cole, a white woman, and Mary Church Terrell, a Black woman. Our branch represents what it looks like to work together for racial and gender equality. Considering our history of bridging Black and white women together for racial and gender equality, it is fitting that our branch is holding these monthly conversations. It is also not a coincidence that we decided to launch our first conversation today, Juneteenth, the day that African Americans celebrate their freedom and achievement while encouraging continuous self-development and respect for all cultures. We will never forget our history, and we will always embrace our future with faith and optimism. So here's the reality, you guys. Some of us are dealing with unprecedented grief. As Black women, we are broken with pain and invalidated anger. We are broken spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, and economically. We are tired beyond words, but we are resilient and we are hopeful. And today we have a group of resilient and hopeful women who have decided, despite personal or professional obligations or fears, that this topic is worthy of their sacrifice. women who decided to be color brave, to be bold, and to show us their brilliance, and to open their hearts to have this difficult conversation that far too long have been buried deep in their mind, bodies, and spirit. And so before I forget, I want to thank everyone on this panel for your time and your talent. It is not unnoticed. So the purpose of these webinars is to empower women and men, Kirk and David, to move forward from the fear zone and to create a learning zone where individuals can learn through understanding, which will result in growth. For without growth, there is no advancement. And each episode builds upon one another. And I hope that you can join us as we continue this conversation over the next few months. Hour and a half is just not enough time. So without further ado, let's get to this conversation. So today's conversation is titled, Be Color Brave, Addressing the Uncomfortable Conversation About Race. I chose to start with Ms. Hobson's video because I wanted everyone to create a foundation where everyone decides to be color brave, to set the foundation where everyone feels comfortable to share their innermost thoughts, fears, and tap onto the door of their uncomfortability. The only thing I ask is that everyone open their hearts to understand and respect and to offer compassion to everyone, every thought, and every opinion. We don't have to agree. We just need to respond with respect. So the structure of the conversation is semi-formal. I'll ask the panelists some questions that were sent to me prior to the webinar by some participants. And then afterwards, we will open the floor to answer questions of the participants at the end. Now, if you would like for us to see you as you are asking your question, please let us know and I will share your screen with the group. But just know that we are recording this webinar, and if you don't want anyone to see you, I suggest you stay anonymous. I also want to apologize in advance if we have any technical issues. This is our first time using Zoom, and I actually hate not seeing everyone. So maybe the next one we'll be able to fix it as we move forward. So with that being said, I want to start with Harriet Maiden. Harriet is the branch's vice president of programming as well as the secretary of the board. She called me about 2 weeks ago and expressed her desire to be more aware of the most recent incidents surrounding the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And I'm quite sure most African Americans received a similar call. She was sincere and passionate. The two qualities I look for in deciding if individuals truly want to see a change. So together, we came up with these series. So Harriet, I want to publicly thank you for being color brave and for wanting to learn more about the African American experience. Welcome, Harriet.
Thank you, Kim.
Also on the panel, we have Dr. Ashley Hutchison. I met Ashley about 2 years ago when we worked together to organize a STEM workshop for the U.S. News and World Report Workforce Development Conference. Dr. Ashley Hutchison currently serves as the Senior Manager of Engineering Education at the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. She's also an adjunct professor of biology, at the University of the District of Columbia, and the founder and president of STEM Innovation Consulting. She currently works on diversity and inclusion issues within the STEM education and embark on careers that would allow her to make meaningful contributions on diversifying the scientific workforce and empowering those interested in STEM. She has also published over 12 peer-reviewed articles, including 2 book chapters on urban STEM education and counter spaces for minority women in STEM. She's also been recipient of several awards and honors. Welcome, Ashley. Next, we have Kimberly Quinn. Kimberly was one of our 2019 TEDx U-Street Women speakers, and her audition tape showed me not only was she bold and brilliant and a badass, she was authentic and unapologetic, qualities I love in a person. Dr. Kimberly Quinn currently teaches positive psychology, Minecraft, and cognitive psychology at Champlain College in Burlington, Vermont, where she lives and where she is also known as the Wellbeing and Success Coach. Kimberly teaches courses on trauma for the community college in Vermont and speaks at various conferences. She is a two-time TEDx speaker, and she hosts many webinars on trauma and resilience and hosts weekly podcasts around Minecraft. Welcome, Kimberly. Finally, we have Dr. Toni Miles Malone, better known as Justine Love. Justine and I worked together on a few projects. Most recently, she served as the 2019 TEDx U Street Women MC and will continue her role as the MC for the next conference in November. Dr. Toni Miles Maloney is a charismatic, powerful, energetic, concerned member of her native Washington, D.C. community, and as a former director of the Community and Public Affairs for CBS Radio in Washington, D.C., and she's also the president of Just Ask Justine Media Relations. Dr. Miles Maloney maintains a national scope of issues in underserved communities, connecting urban radio to community concerns as a renowned health advocate and educator. She collaborates with numerous organizations to bring awareness and empowerment, passionately educating the community on various issues with focus on the women of color and youth. Welcome, Justine. And everyone, please welcome our panelists. This is your panelist for today. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So I will start with Harriet. Hi, Harriet. So I would like for you, just to start us off, is to tell everyone, why did you reach out to me? Were you scared? Why did you feel comfortable asking me?
I was a bit hesitant, but our relationship, we know each other for 6 years. I always call you my presidente of the AAUW, and I just felt comfortable enough to call you. But I was extremely upset. You know what, since I'm locked down with everybody else and haven't gone out for 3 months, you know, I wasn't participating in the streets on these demonstrations, but I, like most other people, watching them and the video. And I think the video, you know, maybe, not maybe, but racist acts happened before, but 3 at least, all within a month, basically, of Black people being run down, shot, killed in their own beds. And I think George Floyd's "I cannot breathe." If that doesn't get to you, I don't think you're a human being. And it was just so upsetting to me. And I just felt very, very helpless. I didn't know what I could do as a person. I didn't feel like I was doing anything to make change. And I really wanted to speak to you if, you know, there was something you thought, hey, maybe I could do, or maybe our chapter could do. So that was basically my motivation.
And what does it mean for you to be color brave? I mean, we just heard Melody talk a lot about being color brave and not color blind. What does that mean to you? Yes.
Well, I was not familiar with Melody Hobson before. I thought her speech, her TED Talk was moving, and just to me, the essential thing that she said is to be brave enough to step outside of your own circle and see people that may be different from you, have different opinions from you, and be open to what they have to say and not automatically be defensive, but to realize that there are other opinions in life and they're going to bring things to the table that maybe you haven't thought of. Or you may also find, hey, that person agrees with me so much, I should have been you know, we should have been in lockstep long ago. So I felt that her emphasis on being open to other people was very important, and just that every child should have the opportunity to dream and dream big. not dream small, not have their ambitions quashed. So to me, that was like the essence of her TED Talk.
Great. Ashley, I'm gonna ask you this question, and I'm quite sure most African Americans have had these phone calls, but did you receive any calls? And if so, how did that make you feel?
So thank you, Kim. I received calls and I received texts and emails. For me, it was new, it was shocking, and I didn't quite understand the foundation in what those emails and texts were sent. They were laced in sincerity and nice and kind words. But for me, the individuals that sent those texts, calls, my friends, regardless of their color, didn't have to send a text or email because they knew what was going on. They knew how I was going to be processing what was going on because we had these conversations because we were friends. And so associates reaching out, or even extended people I may have met in passing reaching out, it felt like I was one of the few Black people that they knew, and they wanted to acknowledge to someone other than their circle what was going on. And so for me, it wasn't, I understood why they sent it, but it wasn't the comforting thing that could have been done.
Okay. All right. Dr. Kimberly, tell me a little bit about what it means to be color brave.
Okay, well, first of all, I'm just thinking we should acknowledge this because I'm so honored to be here in general. I think we should acknowledge it just as Juneteenth right now, okay?
Yes.
The day that, and which makes it even larger for me, like it's larger when we, you know, sadly, what was it, Gordon Granger, Major General of the United States, had to force his way into Galveston, Texas, to force 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation from Abe Lincoln, right? Had to force these hanger-oners, these rebels, trying to still keep this systematic oppression going. So I just have to we got to feel that right now, you know, because it's huge. So I lost my question. All right. So color brave. Okay, I got to just say that I want to relate to Melody's being comfortable with the uncomfortable, because you know what, human beings in general, like you and I talked about, Kim, right? We don't want to be uncomfortable in any way, not at the dentist, you know what I mean? So people don't warm up to being uncomfortable. And it takes a commitment and conscious effort to be able to sit in that place of, I don't like this. You know what I mean? To sit in that place. And I'll tell you, I have a very, very dear friend of mine who exudes love and wisdom and peace, like with every step he takes. And he's been telling me for years that we can't do what we don't know, right? It's just true. We can't do what we don't know. And once we have this awareness and this knowledge, then we have a responsibility. There's no stepping away from that, because once we know, we're committed, right? And so I guess to answer your question about the color brave part, this responsibility for me, I cannot speak for anyone else but myself, right? My responsibility is to identify with and commit to anti-racism. Mm-hmm. So it's not just, non-racism, that's passive, okay? People who were around watching the murder of George Floyd, which is what it was, for 9 whole seconds, okay? That's all bystander stuff. That is not acceptable. Anti-racism is actively standing up to every single micro and macro aggression that hurts people of color.
Thank you. I don't even know how to respond to that, but I appreciate you so much for being so authentic and open with your passion around this issue, because these conversations have ignited a lot of inner feelings and emotions for people. And first, I want to thank everyone for containing them as we have this conversation. And I know for some folks, the call that we've received seemed insincere by some. It just seemed as if, you're just making the call just because you feel like it, that you're not really sincere. And that's what I saw differently in Harriet. So Justine, I'm going to ask you a question. Did you receive any calls? And if you did, were they sincere or not? Or were they just people who just said, well, I called my one Black friend, so I should be fine, check mark?
Well, none of my good white girlfriends called me. I did not get a single call. I got many calls from my sisters, my black women, and they were upset. So no, I didn't get a single call. I don't know if they were afraid to address it with me, but not a single call.
Wow. How did that
Not a
make you
single
feel?
text. I wasn't surprised. You know, guilt and shame makes people not respond. And I don't know if they were afraid what I was going to say or how, how react to them even calling me, but not a single call.
And I know a lot of people who have lost Facebook friends over this.
Yes.
A lot of people who have lost associates, peers, because of this, because of either people are truly showing their colors, true nature rather, and or people who are just saying, you know what, I thought that you were cool and I guess you're not. So, but you know what, it really brings up this big question I have, and I'm going to direct this to Kimberly because she's the psychologist out of the group. So tell me, what is the difference between racism and prejudice? And then how does white privilege fit into all of this?
Okay, Kim, it's a good one. Because, well, it can be confusing. We throw these words around, and prejudice is actually largely unconscious, or we'd say, like the sexy word for it is implicit, right? Implicit memory. I like to say it's in the vault. So we hear all this stuff when we're kids. We don't even know why, and then it becomes conscious. And it's also, its source is obviously in ignorance, right? And what's different is racism involves structural power. It's systemic. And what I mean by that is the perceived race of superiority has all kinds of things in place to keep people of color from thriving. That's the best way I can say it, from thriving, away from quality healthcare, away from, good education, away from, that obviously leads to jobs. It's huge, and it's systemic. It's systemic. So that is probably the largest difference there. We can be prejudiced about anything. And I was having a chat with, I think it was Justine earlier, because she was right. We're also creatures of habit, which is also largely unconscious. It's just like a word for unconscious behavior, right? And to shift a habit takes a whole lot of effort. Okay, part two of that. Yes, I'm aware of my white privilege for sure. We talked about that yesterday, but I changed my like example here because this is way better. I never had, when white people were kids, most white people, I can't speak for all white people, obviously, we had the talk, right? It was the old school birds and the bees, like how it all happens, right? That's what we had, the talk. I never had the talk about, a mother saying, you know what, I love you so much, you can be anything you want to be, up all the way up to, let's say, 11 or 12. You're getting out to go out in the world a little bit more as a teenager. And then she says, here's the thing, just because I love you so much doesn't mean the world will. In fact, the world probably won't. And this is the talk, is I got to let you know how to deal with, when you inevitably get pulled over by a police officer. Make sure you have your school ID on you always. Make sure you speak softly. Make sure you don't reach in your pockets without asking permission of the officer who pulled you over. And don't give a tone, forget words, of anything that can be misconstrued as sass. And this is so big, as I'm sure you all know, and in Black communities, many Black communities, police departments even have after-school discussions that are a thing, like a digital, to have parents have this talk with their Black children. I never had that talk.
Wow.
I never had that talk because there was no need for that talk. So that is probably my biggest example of white privilege. And I just want to say one more thing, because it's amazing how like the universe is talking to me here. Because one of my colleagues / friends, Ashley Michelle, she's constantly talking about, who happens to be of color, forgot to mention that. She's constantly talking about our white privilege and, the guilt and shame and stuff that's like wrapped into that. But, not to like reside there, but to embrace that white privilege to make a difference, use it. That we can actually use that to lift ourselves to an equal playing ground. I think that's it, Kim. Is that good?
That's good. Harriet, I'm going to ask you, do you know your white privilege? And talk to me more about how you see white privilege.
well, I don't know when the phrase white privilege began, but I guess, I grew up in a very white area where I think I've told you before, not only were there no Black people and no other people of color, but I thought that the world was made up of Jewish and Italian people, and that was it. I didn't meet a Protestant until I went to work. So I don't think that I really understood the term white privilege for a long, long time, to just assume that the world is how you see it and that everything's going to go your way because, you're entitled to it. And so I do think it's important to realize that. I've been trying to educate myself in this 2 weeks since our call, and I've been furiously looking at YouTube and reading. And one of the books I read was White Fragility. And it makes a lot of valid points, but I felt like it was too focused on analyzing white people. I mean, why should Black people or people of color care what is motivating a white person not to do what they should? The white person should come up with it. And if they're going to do anything, they should do concrete actions. Educating themselves should be on them. That, white privilege doesn't mean that you're going to be schooled by anybody else. You should figure it out on your own.
Kim, go ahead, Ashley.
So I think that highlights in itself this concept of white privilege, as well as kind of the differences between the two groups here, especially on this call. I don't have the option of not being aware. And what was given to me, so I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana, New Orleans. It's a very Black city. I grew up in a Black neighborhood, Black schools. I was surrounded by Black people of all different creeds, colors, success rates. So I saw it all. And so I still had to be aware of what other people, I had to be aware of myself and what other people saw me as, and the potential consequences of showing up as myself everywhere I went, regardless of how empowered or how special or how many times my mother called me a princess. It goes back to our survival, right? We have examples, and we have the public ones that everyone knows, and then we have the ones that only Black people know about because we know we hear all the time and don't make the news. You have to be conscious of your surroundings, because there was a point in time, and I think I am the generation right after the group that actually integrated schools. And so my generation was, I'm in my mid-30s, we didn't see water fountains or doors that white or Black. We are the product of the group that took that down, and I think that says a lot about our youth. But if you walked in front of a white person at a certain time, you were liable to be rude. So therefore, you have to be aware of your surroundings. You can't just run out in the street and do whatever you want to do. You have to be aware, and be aware of you as well as aware of others. I think that is a I don't want to call it a burden, because I anything other than who I am, but that is a part of being Black and being a Black woman. You have to be aware of all of your surroundings. And so I think that ties into this concept of the privilege that you have to not be aware, or to choose to educate yourself, or choose not to educate yourself, that we don't have that privilege to do because my life depends on it. And I think that's why a lot of the idea of knowing so much, or trying to stay focused and tuned and calling out or holding people accountable becomes so important, because my life literally depends on these concepts and these notions. And that's from a survival standpoint. And then I'll let Justine jump in here. My career depends on how I step into a room. If I just show up with what's perceived as unkept, uncombed, undressed, ungroomed, then there are stereotypes, there are prejudices that are going to be put on me for showing up in that fashion. Whereas I feel that my non-Black colleagues can have the freedom and flexibility to show up however they feel. And we can talk
Yeah.
about it in the discussion, especially I can talk about that from a science standpoint, being in a lab. I have colleagues who have showed up with green hair. If I showed up with green hair, not only would my mother come for me, God rest, but the rest of the Black community would come for me. You can't show up in them people's lab like that. And then people is usually referring to a white hierarchy or institution. I'll let Justine jump in.
Well, you know what? Thank you, Ashley and Kimberly and Harriet. But, you know, as we were listening, I've been listening to each one of you, and triggers come up all over again. I remember after we watched the video about being colorblind or color brave, in the beginning, I was teaching my daughter to be colorblind, but I was always color brave. But I was trying to get her to understand where her mother was going and why, you know, look at everybody as a human being. So we had an incident when she was in high school, and we went to an all-girls parochial high school in Potomac, Maryland. And if you all know anything about the metropolitan area, that's a very affluent area. And one of her classmates, and talking about white privilege, came up to me and asked me, now this is a 15-year-old girl asking a grown woman, asked me, what do you and your husband do that you can afford to send your daughter here? And I looked at her, I said, and why are you asking me that? Well, I just want to know. I said, well, first of all, my husband works. And I proceeded to tell her, you know, what job. I don't know why I was justifying to a child, but I was. And then not the evilness, but the tongue lashing came out from me. And I asked her, I said, well, I don't work. I said, she said, well, my mother doesn't work either. I said, well, you know what? We make enough money that I need somebody to help me around my house. Is your mother available to come help me clean? Do you know, her face dropped? But that was the white privilege, that she had the audacity or the courage or the nerve to even ask me, what did we do that we could afford to send our daughter here? Now, the best part of what's going on now is I am blessed to have another color brave princess that I am training. And that is my granddaughter. And to show her what it means to be color brave, you know, because these 2020 babies that have come on this planet, their whole world is so different, so different.
Yes, and that's why I like this title. No, that's okay. That's good. That's good, because this panel represents all of the generations. So we have a millennial. I'm a Gen Z X. Harriet is baby boomer. Kimberly, I believe you're Gen X. I think you're just on that cusp between Gen X and baby boomers. And Justine, you're a baby boomer. And so we all have different experiences. You know, as I talk to my sons, I have 2 sons, you know, and one has decided to drive down to Myrtle Beach, y'all, okay? But we're gonna put that aside. And it is amazing. You're absolutely right, Ashley, when you're saying that we were taught, just like I taught my children at a very young age, how to interact with police officers, how to interact with white people in general. And as a Black woman, you know, you get this, you have this defense up, that's this defense up, that's the only thing that you see. And then that becomes a stereotype, that we're angry or that we're mad all the time. But it's a defense, because every time you walk out of the house, there is something that you have to deal with, whether it's racism or prejudice, something that you have to deal with. You have to see, you have to justify all of your actions. And if you don't justify your actions, it then becomes a misunderstanding, and it becomes something totally horrible. So it's very difficult being a Black woman, as well as just being an African American in general. But as we talk about racial attitudes between Black and white women, all of these experiences that we have, both white women and Black women, make up how we treat each other. And so I think that as we start to talk about, you know, the things or the attitudes or how they were formed as a child actually relates to how you relate to individuals. You know, I'm gonna start. For me, only thing I heard from my mom when she came home from work was, I can't stand that white girl. She always comes in and she wants to take my job, you know? They promoted her higher than I am, and I have more education, and I have a more experience than she does, but yet and still she gets the better position, as well as she makes more money than I do. And so she comes home and she is upset with her situation at work, and that reflected on me. And as that reflected on me, it reflected and shaped my view of white women. So I'm gonna ask the panelists, how do you think your racial attitudes were formed towards Black or white women? I'm gonna start with Kimberly.
Okay, I just unmuted myself. Okay, so I actually grew up, thankfully, in a very tolerant town, even for back then, right? So even though I had a very dysfunctional household, one thing I cannot say is that there was any kind of like non-acceptance stuff. And I'm not gonna say buts. They say everything before buts BS, right? I have some extended family members when we go there for this and that, and so I've had several experiences. I'm very embarrassed to even say them, but this is the uncomfortable part. Like right now, I'm feeling like my hair is standing on end, and I'm feeling like really uncomfortable right now, way uncomfortable. I remember being, just a little kid. I don't even know, like 7, 8, something, not even getting it. We're driving through, I want to say Chicago, in an area that may be perceived as unsafe. Right away, everybody's locking doors. And I remember, I'm like 8. What's with the locks? What are we doing? And I didn't even get that. And then I remember another very stereotypical thing that is an extended family member said when I was very young, again, like 7 or 8 something, different person, said something about Black people and fried chicken and watermelon. And I was so perplexed. I'm like, I like that, because anybody knows me knows I'm like, chicken wings are top of my list. And I just didn't understand it. Like it didn't make sense to me. As far as treating people differently, at least consciously, I did not have anybody ever, I didn't have that, thankfully. There were those stereotypes I just told you about, those were real. And they were very confusing to me as a child. Very, very confusing to me. I can tell you high school too, one more thing. I went to, even though it's a relatively diverse area, New Paltz, New York, about an hour out of Manhattan. In my high school, there were maybe a half dozen students of color out of about 800. And I tell you, it goes back to Justine, I think. I thought of this when you were saying what you were saying. I did not plan this at all. In fact, I didn't plan lots of things. I'm shooting from the heart right now. I remember the two girls were one was in my class and the 2 were a class above me. And all 3 of them were stellar students. And one's actually famous right now in the sportscasting world. And I remember she would stay with straight A's, and she sat like, her posture, I remember having this memory as like 16 years old. I could tell she felt like she had to be perfect. Right. I could tell she had to be perfect. The other one's mother was they're all nice families, all wonderful families. The other one was the music teacher. Just great families. But I thought the way she held herself, the way she was so careful about everything. I remember thinking about the pressure on her. I never said it or anything like that. I thought, wow, that's it. That's all I got for that one.
So I'm going to answer the question, Kim, but I do, just as we frame this discussion from a learning standpoint, there are a few things, Kimberly, because we've got Kimberly. Your story just brings up, right? So one, you don't have those you're not racist, so you're very, understanding, open, right? So as a Black woman, I want to say woman, as a Black woman, even if I connect with you and become friends. The trouble is there's somebody in your circle that I don't necessarily know that I can trust.
Oh,
Right.
Therefore, if I go with you to a family picnic, I might run into a cousin who decides, I'm gonna ask her some questions that are inappropriate. This gets into now my space, my sanity, my protection. And so with befriending you, I have to leave it at a certain point because I don't know, you may be vetted, but I don't know if the rest that branch out from you has also been vetted or has the same ideas that you have. That was one. Two, when you told your story about the unsafe neighborhood, um, you didn't say that it was a Black neighborhood, but the assumption was that it was a Black neighborhood because you were in Chicago and it was unsafe. So those are the notions, right, that we in society, and I'm Black and I still got that from the story, make those assumptions. We know full well, so when we think of urban, we think of Black, and we think of urban poverty, we think of Black. And then there's this concept, my sister, I think, is on here. She's going to scold me after. But when we think of poverty in white people, we may think of like a trailer park perspective, but it's not an urban piece, right? And so those type of wording and assumptions we take with us, right? In terms of just facing, I guess, like how the racial attitudes toward, for me, toward white women were formed. As I mentioned, I grew up in an all-Black neighborhood home environment, and I grew up in a middle to upper middle class family. My parents, who had integrated or were in newly integrated spaces, what they brought home to me was how to interact with white people. And I think my parents' intention was to shield me.
Right.
My sister and I went to two very different schools, but to shield us from a lot of that, because the thought is that you're going to run into someone who is going to not mean you well, and you need to be prepared to how to deal with it, right? And so they didn't come home, and they came home because they were dealing with the microaggression. So they were no longer necessarily a Black or white only sign, but you weren't being promoted, you weren't being acknowledged. And these stories come from generation to generation, and they are passed down in Black homes. So you have all of these years of not being acknowledged for your intelligence, not being acknowledged for your achievements, being overlooked, and you share them with the next group because you need to be aware of this. Part of the reason that I have a PhD, I love science, is great, but my mother and my father wanted me to be equipped with the tools to be able to stand up for myself, and education was viewed as that tool, right? So you go out, you get the best education you can, preferably the highest, so that if anyone tries to undermine you, you have this certificate, you have this paper that lets people know where I stand. And there are pros and cons to using that as a vetting process, but the reality is that is a tool to walk in, so that so now the assumption about me changes. Even though you see me as a Black woman, when you see that certificate or you see those letters, those assumptions change. So I think for me, the attitude, it wasn't so much I experienced it in school. I did not go to diverse schools at all. I went to a diverse elementary school, but I had no clue what was going on. I didn't experience that. So those attitudes and prejudice came from my Black family members and friends dealing with their experiences with white people and the historical context, bringing that back home as a lesson for your survival.
You know, it's interesting you said that, Ashley. I'm thinking about my first experience, and my friends will have said to me, you need to get over it. But you know what? I was traumatized. And in the kindergarten, I brought my lunch to school because there was no school lunch. So I brought my lunch to school, and I had a banana in my lunch. And it was a little blonde haired girl with a long stringy ponytail. So if any of my blonde sisters out, please don't judge me, but that's exactly how I felt. She would hit me with that ponytail because there was so many of us in the class, and our desks were on top of it. So I wanted to cut the ponytail off or stick it in the inkwell because I was sick of it. But she called me a monkey because I brought a banana to school. Do you know, to this day, I will not eat a banana because it traumatized me. And so that was the first incident of how I felt that how I was looked down on. Then the next one was when I had long hair and, folks asking me, can I touch your hair? You're not 100% black, are you? You're mixed with something. And I'm getting like, how dare you ask me these questions and feel comfortable? Maybe it was because I made them feel comfortable. Maybe they wanted to learn something, but it made me uncomfortable and it made me angry. That, because I've never asked anybody white, well, why's your hair stringy? Another example of my my conceived notion of white girls, because this starts for me way back. When I was growing up, I thought that all young white girls were fast. That they put out because they started dating at 13 and 12. I didn't go out on my first date, and it wasn't alone. I had to be in a group until I was 17 years old. And going to an all-girls high school, which I did, that was mixed, they come back and they're talking about, yeah, well, we did this, and, I've been dating since I'm there. And I'm like, I came home and asked my father, well, can I date? He said, no. No, it said no. And, when it was graduation and they were all going to the beach, I said, well, can I go? No.
Yeah.
You just can't do it. That's not your world. And I don't feel safe with you going on an excursion like that, because I don't know what they're going to do to you.
You know what, Justine? And that's a great point. And I think that's what created this illusion between Black and white women, this division rather, because for me it was, well, how come they can get away with it and I can't?
Right.
Because we were looked at, it's like we're equal. We're both women. So
go ahead.
why is it different? What is the difference between the two? We're both women.
I don't know. You
We're both educated.
out in yours. It wasn't like that. But
We fast, Harriet?
I just was going to say that when Justine said "put out," and boy, it's back to high school, because I haven't heard that term twice.
I'd love to jump in here on part of why, I think. Okay. And by the way, if you have ever heard of Resma Menakem, he's a trauma specialist and he's of color. He has got a podcast that'll just blow you away. But a lot of what we're talking about, indirectly or directly, comes down to generational trauma. That is the difference. 14 generations of generational trauma for Black people. That is right there a huge difference. And Ruby Bridges, I was reading up on that amazing woman, right? At 6 years old, the whole place cleared out with marshals bringing her into the school. And she says, babies, we're all born into this world with clear hearts.
Yes.
So here we go. How do 14 generations of pain and trauma and all the things we're talking about still happen? That is what we're talking about. The babies are born beautiful, cute little babies with beautiful, pure hearts. It's this generational oppression that we as adults are perpetuating. And that right there is the problema.
Yes. So I have a question that is wanting you, Kimberly, to rename the podcast. But what we will also do is we will make sure that we put all of these resources on our website. Everything that Kimberly has talked about, but also there's other reading materials that we will also put on the website. And then at the end of the session, as we get closer to the end, we will talk about solutions. We will talk about some recommendations and what we as individuals can commit to ourselves. So we'll get to that when we get closer to the end. But, I want to get back to the struggle between, Black and white women, and for me, I know it started with this whole thing of inequality. What is wrong with me that I can't be treated the same way as a white woman? And so that's where the entire idea of something with me. you know, rather than it was them. We always internalized it rather than it being, okay, it's just, you know, the way that society is. So I want to I will ask this question to the panelists. So what are the main struggles between Black and white women, and where do you think it comes from? Anyone can start.
So I'll jump in to start. I think white women have a power that has to be acknowledged and that there's an unwillingness to share. And I think that comes from your race, not necessarily your gender. And I think that between the two groups is that those intersections are defining sections, and they're very important sections. When we look at the numbers and we look at the case for women's rights collectively, if you ask most Black women about the feminist movement, it is viewed as a movement. And part of what I'm going to say is it has been passed down to me because I was not there at the suffrage movement or in the 60s or the 50s. I was born in 1984. And then the other part is what I've seen more recently. What I was told and have read from Black scholars about the feminist movement or the women's movement in terms of it being a white women's movement is Black women were already working, they were outside the home, they were tired. White women were trying to be viewed as something more than just a woman, and they were trying to have that flexibility and an option to go where they wanted to go outside the home. Those are two different arguments. But when you look at the literature from different perspectives, both of those arguments are not reflected. When we look at the most recent Women's March, I want to say in 2016, there were issues from African-American women because our plight, our issues were not being brought to the table.
Exactly.
So that's a problem with the two groups trying to work together. If we just think about the numbers, everyone mentioned, I'm in STEM, right? I do STEM education policy work. We have, 86% of doctoral graduates in STEM are white or Asian. Less than 3% are Black women. But when we say we're moving women forward, that can't be the case because Black women are still less than 3%. You have 4.4%. I'm a researcher, so I have to bring my data, my numbers. my PI would just come from my neck. But you have 4.5% CEOs are white women positions when 0.2% are Black women. And so I think when we talk about these struggles and these differences, one of them is acknowledging the power that comes along with one group and being willing to, I don't know if it's share, yield that power, acknowledge it to promote the other group. And I think that gets into the whole concept of being an ally and using your privilege and your position to better people. And I won't jump ahead, but I think that ties into that concept of struggle in terms of what the two groups are dealing with as we look at, we're all women, but the differences that our different groups are facing.
Yeah, and before we go any further, I want to say that we're going to go dig deeper into that intersectionality piece at the next session. We're going to spend the entire time talking about that because Ashley, you are absolutely correct about the different views between Black women and white women and how for Black women, we're almost just set aside, when it comes to, women and women's issues. It's always, well, what about Black women? For organizations, they say, well, we hire women or we hire Black people. Well, your Black people are men and your women are white women. So where do we fit in? And we will talk a lot more about that next week, during our next session. But Kimberly, you wanted to respond to that?
I did. And I said, my mind is like fast, it's all over the place. So I just changed what I was going to say right now. So I think a lot of it is cumulative because I'm having a memory of being a little girl. I wasn't actually too into dolls. I was running around more and stuff, but I'd see, Black little girls walking around with white dolls, and it's from early on. I'm thinking that, it's like that.
We had no choice.
I know you, of course, but that stays with us. It also feeds into the trauma thing. And then I actually asked our two youngest daughters, who some of you met last night with our tech issues, Shani and Delaney, right away, I said for their ages, 20 and 23, right away they came up with, hair and cosmetics. You can't even get where we live. You can't even get them unless you order them special. But you can walk into a Walgreens and have no problem getting your foundation if you're white. And then I looked this because they were talking about, I looked at her up just 3 years ago, right in Malden, Massachusetts. These twin black girls got sent home from a charter school for wearing box braids because they had a dress code. And they were neat and gorgeous. They were beautiful. And then not only did they get sent home, they were banned from the prom and sports. So, I mean, come on, that stuff sticks. So it sticks. And then I'm saying, you bring it into the workplace, Ashley. I think it was you. I have to thank you for something later, but it can wait. So then bring it into the workplace when we're all grown up, right? And you've got cumulative black girl with white doll sent home for something that's absolutely ridiculous. Never mind cultural. You have every right to do what your culture, right? So it's just all stupid. And then you bring that into the workplace, and black women have way more pressure to, like, I think it was you saying it, Ashley, the hair and the dress and the, I don't like the word perfect either in any kind of context, but you feel like you have to be perfect in all you behave and how I told you about the students in my high school. And then, but white women can go out to a Christmas party, get a little sloppy drunk, and it's all forgiven, right?
Yes.
Right.
Isn't that enough to piss anyone off? Right. And then also, let's just say I'm thinking of my authentic self at 55. Let's say you're like a seasoned, I don't like the word older, it's bad. So seasoned woman, right? If you're still doing that charade at my age, that would have me very irritated because that's in conflict with my authenticity. If I want to self-express by wearing 5 earrings on the left and I want a little ink on my right shoulder, I can do that. I don't need to explain that to anybody. And it might be in conflict or how I speak or whatever. That's in conflict with my authenticity. That would really be a slow burn. I'm pretty mouthy, so it probably will come right out. And Kim, the last thing I wanted to say to you, because because the words you were using, the dialogue you were using earlier, those were all shame words, and that just breaks my heart, because to me, that's the biggest problem in the whole world. If we healed shame of everyone, there'd be very little need for counselors or anything. That's what is wrong with me. How am I defective? How am I less than? Doesn't mean where it's coming from. It's just to carry that toxicity coming from someone else makes me very angry.
Well, you get that. We've gotten that all our lives. If you were fair-skinned black person, that was one issue. If you were a darker-skinned black person, that's another issue. And, it's how we are perceived. I'm tired, and this is very emotional. I'm tired of apologizing or making exceptions for other people because of who I am. I can't help it. When you see me, you see something that the God has kissed with the sun. Okay? When I smile, it's sunbeams coming out of my mouth. But the rest of the world sees me as I'm not even real.
Right.
I'm not even real.
I'm going to do a quick time check for everyone, and I want to go to Ashley and then Harriet to kind of follow up, and then we need to go to, there's a lot of questions popping up. So Ashley, I know you wanted to respond.
I was just going to point out the hair piece is very near dear to my heart. I have been what we call natural since 1998, when it was not viewed as being attractive for Black women. And I've groomed from that time period when I decided to wear my hair like this, that it had to be put in a less intimidating fashion.
Mm-hmm.
I wear my hair out in its full state, that is intimidating walking into a room. I already have a large stature, and then if I come in with my personality and my hair, it's too much. So I was groomed to pull my hair down to make it less intimidating, or straighten my hair when I went into an interview. And that's a whole nother conversation around images and perspectives. And Kimberly, when you were talking about showing up as yourself at this age, that is something that we are pushing to do now. And there are different things, like I mentioned, my education, it affords me a little more opportunity to show up as myself with the idea that my education is going to back me up in terms of my intelligence. I'm not going to be viewed as less than if I have a tattoo or earrings or long nails. And I'll quickly say this and then turn to Harriet. Even with Melanie, who I love, and I can go down a rabbit hole with her videos, there is still a sense of safeness about her.
Yes.
There's a sense that she has reached a position where she can now say these things and the consequences are not the same. She runs her company, she's at that level, she has infiltrated circles that most Black people cannot infiltrate. And so she has a privilege that she can make
Safe. She's
young,
safe.
right, younger people who are just starting out in their career, or younger Black women, or even younger white women who decide to be an ally and stand up. You put your entire life at jeopardy. And you may never come back from that because someone is holding on to the fact that you said something that is wrong. So I'll leave it there and give it to Harry because I've said a lot. I told y'all that's all.
No, thank you. One thing before I was going to say what I was going to say was there are lots of different videos of Melody Hobson speaking and that go into more depth. And one of the things she says is, you know, be color brave, speak out. What was the worst thing that could happen to you? You could lose your job. But she's a millionaire. And, you know, somebody losing their job, that's pretty bad. But so I also think she has privilege. Plus she wears such designer clothes. I'm sorry.
But that's the thing.
Yeah, I have a question for the group concerning Black and white women. You know, I didn't grow up in an interracial area at all. But after I left high school, you know, at 17 or 18, I went to work. I was going to school at night. But my first jobs, there were people on staff who were Black or Puerto Rican or had handicaps. It was a diverse group. And that's when I was working as a secretary in business. And then I worked as a secretary in the school system. And then later on, I became a teacher in the school system. And I had people who I considered my friends. Now, we never had the discussion about race. We talked about all kinds of things. We talked about family problems. We talked about how much we hated the boss, whatever. We would have discussions. We went to each other's homes. We ate out at lunch every day. But do you think that unless you have that conversation about race, you really can't call it a true friendship? And now if Black women are telling me, if I ask those questions, I'm treating them as if they're spokespeople for the whole Black race, and they don't want to see themselves that way. They're individuals. So I feel like I'm sort of like caught in the middle with that. And what's your opinion? Do you think I'm coming to it from a completely wrong viewpoint? Do you think?
No. Let me respond to that to you, Harriet. My feelings are my feelings, and my experiences are my experiences. And what I would share with you is what I was going to share with you because it happened to me. You know, as I told the group yesterday about how I got sent to HR because I told a story about my father told me that, you know, not that he was going to spank me. Well, he did say that. If I let this white boy or any white boy.
Oh, what happened?
She froze.
She did freeze. But give me, we are running a little bit behind and hopefully
spokesperson for
we
Black
can,
people.
Okay, we are running a little bit behind, but what I would like for us to do is, you know, I sent out a poll for the audience to take, a quick poll. And while they're taking that poll, I want us to think about just pretty much a quick one-liner or summation of what you get from this session, number one. And then two, what are some recommendations of how people can move beyond this? Because what I want to create is not only an atmosphere where we have a discussion, but also come to a point where there are some actionable solutions and some actionable suggestions that everyone can do personally to become an ally or to ensure that if, let's say, a white woman does ask you this question, to be more open to answer it. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Ashley, if you could, you know, do your closing statement.
So I think for me, this was very beneficial because I wouldn't have the opportunity to talk to white women from different generations. The few, and I won't name the number, but the few that I have are my age, and the friendship is around the friendship is there because I do feel like I can trust them and we can have these kind of discussions if we need to. They've also volunteered some of this information to let me know that I am not a racist, which is also something that's done. But there's a connection there around other issues. So I think for me, this is beneficial because I wouldn't have these conversations at all. I would have them with older Black women, but not older white women. I think the other part of your question was what are resources we can utilize? Recommendations. So I think definitely for Black women, we have to continue to tell our story, continue telling our viewpoints, continue giving examples, however polished or unpolished they are, however uncomfortable they are. I think we have to continue to do that, to speak up and hold people accountable. Because I'm Southern and I'm Methodist, there's a level of grace I think you can afford people in there, especially if there's sincerity and wanting to learn more as opposed to ignorance and wanting to perpetuate that ignorance. But I think standing up and showing up is one of the major steps that you can do. We talked about this yesterday in terms of just how do we give that advice and who do we give it to. But I think the idea of showing up in our presence and our stories and our interactions and showing who we are and the different flavors that Black people come in will continues to showcase and expose that we are not just one group. Full disclosure, I don't like watermelon.
I do.
You know, and there's some people that will come for me, Black or white, about that. But that exists is shocking, right? And so the more we tell our stories, the more we show up to these spaces, the more people are able to see that I don't represent every Black person in the world. I don't necessarily think white people are viewed that way. I don't think Kimberly and Harry, you are representing every white woman. The assumption is that it's just you. But if we were to take this on a larger scale, we three would be representing every Black woman in the world.
Yes.
What they do.
Yes.
Too hard a burden.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
let me chime in on that about what we can do. I have several girlfriends, and one of them, I'm thankful that she's on the call. I love her unconditionally because she's sincere. And, you know, we share things. I know things about her family that she shares with me, but we really have never had an in-depth conversation. But she shared something with me that I want to be a part of so that I can get a better perspective to understanding how white women think. I'm going to join the Junior League. Now, if that's not the whitest of white women's organizations, I'm going to join them. But I really want to understand and be in the room so they can hear my perspective and be inclusive of me. I want to thank Harriet and I want to thank Kim that those are my two new friends. And my first step is when I don't know you, let me reach out so I can make a sound decision whether I like you or I don't.
True.
And I like both of them.
Thank you.
Kimberly?
Yeah, I would say first to listen. I mean, really hear people. We can all pretend and do that politically correct thing. And I just hope we're all past that. And that means committing to, like I said in the beginning, anti-racism. There's no like stepping to the sides of that anymore, like tiptoeing and being all smooth and polite and, you know, I'm non-racist. Well, that means you're part of the problem, right? It means to step up to the microaggressions too. And I want to say something earlier too about, I think it was Will Smith who said it, I think, that it's like people keep saying this is getting worse, right?
Right.
He said, no,
right.
It's not getting worse, it's getting filmed.
Right.
So like,
Right.
yeah, so we need to really be hearing and listening to each other to shield us from that shame. And lastly, this is just something for me, because I can't, obviously can only speak for me. I'm a big fan of practicing mindfulness. Here's my disclaimer. I am not saying mindfulness is going to fix racism. I did not say that. However, racism is a form of trauma. We know
Yes,
that,
it
right? It's a form of trauma. Mindfulness and also racism robs us of humanity, right? And trauma robs us of humanity. Whatever that source of the trauma is, robs us of humanity. And when we practice mindfulness, it can replenish that. And it can also help us to be less reactive and more responsive. Again, I'm not saying it fixes anything. I'm just saying it's good. And also gratitude. It really helps us be in a better place. We're not like reacting all over the place. You know, we're kind of just Okay, drop in and be more present with ourselves. I think that's it. I'm a big stand-up person. You know, if you watch somebody walking through a grocery store door and there's a person of color behind them and the door just, slant, say something. Oh, I'm sure you meant to hold the door open. Doesn't mean you get all preachy, but call them out. Microaggressions turn into macroaggressions. I mean, that's right. So all that seemingly, not little, it's big, but seemingly little stuff stirs up that little girl who had the white dollar, it's all big stuff. And I guess I want to say the last thing, I almost forgot my Ruby Bridges. Hold on one second here. Ruby. She talks about the whole, the clear, babies being born with a clear heart, and that we really need to appreciate that and get that. And that obviously has everything to do with love. And I'll just say, for me, love is not just a feeling. It's like, oh, I'm feeling loving. Well, good for you, right?
Right.
And for me, that's an action word. It means get off your butt and be kind and be loving. Like in general in life, it's an action word. Love to me is not passive. You need to step up, step into that place and do something.
Right.
Thank you very
Harriet.
much.
I thank everybody on the panel for being so honest, and Justine and everyone else who really told honest stories from their heart. I really appreciate that very much. One of the things I've been doing and will continue to do is I'm trying to educate myself by reading, by watching movies, by watching YouTube. And some of the people that I've read and seen were Carol Anderson. She's a Black professor at Emory. She wrote a book called White Rage. I heard her speak on YouTube, and I thought that the book was going to be about recent voter suppression. And she goes all the way back from after Reconstruction. I'm sure she's going to come up to the present day. She's excellent. And I read White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, and she talks about, anti-racism. When finishing her book, I was so depressed, my whole identity was destroyed. But I think she has some valuable things to say. I saw on YouTube another professor, Black professor, John McWhorter, and he is a professor at Columbia University in New York, and he really is against what she says. So I think it's good to hear more than one part of the conversation. And one thing that I thought was very valuable that I found online, and it was coming from a Washington, D.C. commissioner of District 8C07, and he gives what are practical actions that a person could take. So I'm not going to read the whole thing because it'd go too long, but I'll just say a few of the things he said. Like Justine said, she wants to join the Urban League, not the Urban League, the Junior League.
Junior League.
Which made me laugh hysterically. Didn't want the Jews either, I can tell you. But
let's go.
Become actively engaged in an organization, Greater Washington Urban League, Metropolitan Association of Black Social Workers, and etc. Then he gives us the whole voter education and registration forums on how to nominate, blah, 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 and submit testimony and budget recommendations at the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety information. It says filing police complaints. So if you are abused, just don't hold it in,
Right. And Harriet, if you could send that to me, and I will make sure I put those on the resources. And I want to honor our time, but I want to just say and close out that there was another article that I will put on the resource listing. Is White Women. It's a Huffington Post article dated June 4th, 2020, that's entitled White Women, I'm glad you're showing up, but I'm not sure I trust you just yet. And I think that it's important as we strive as individuals, as humans, to be better people, to realize that we have to educate ourselves. And this is one of the ways that we could do this. This is a great article that actually discussed what it is and what we can do and what you can do as white women to understand and to respect the position that we as Black women are in. that we didn't do this to ourselves. This is a position that we have been placed in. And in order for us to move forward as a society, it's not just about, Black women or white women or women of color or men. As a society, it is important for us to be able to work better together. And in order to do that, it is through love. And love is an action verb. And love means getting to know and better understand the next person. And so one of the things that I encourage everyone to do, and one of the things that this series is doing, is to get people to understand a different perspective, to also understand and to take a step out and do something that you don't normally do. Be around people who you're not necessarily around all the time. It's important for us to make sure that we take the steps in order to make society a better place. And so I want to close out with this one quote. Well, before I do that quote, I have to say thank you to the supporters of this particular conversation, which is, of course, the Washington, D.C. branch of the American Association of University of Women, Journey to Your Promised Land, as well as TEDx U Street Women. And they are on our website if you would like some additional information about those organizations. But, there's so much going on. It is hard to navigate. You have the protests with the murder of Breonna and George, but then you also have this COVID. We're also in a pandemic, and so a lot of the time we're talking about trauma over top of trauma, and people are frustrated and people are lashing out. And instead of just saying those people and shutting the door, what I'm asking of you and everyone who is still on the call is for you to sit down and understand why the trauma is on top of trauma on top of trauma, because the pandemic is affecting African Americans more than anything else. Any other population is affecting us because of the trauma, because of the past. And then you have the murder of Breonna and George. Additional trauma on top of trauma. And so instead of, oh my God, why can't they just stop, is your reaction. Your reaction, what we're asking is for you to take some time and to stop and to understand, whether it's through reading, whether it's through looking at videos, movies. There are a lot of movies out here who are trying to give people an understanding of why people are frustrated, because it will not go away unless white women use their privilege. You have to use your privilege to open the door for the African American woman behind you in any aspect, if it's work, if it's personal, whatever the case may be. This is the only way as a society we're going to survive. We are one. We are not against each other. We are one. And so I hear a lot of people saying that, oh, I wish 2020 would just go away. We just need to start over. And so here's a quote that I like, and I'll tell you who the quote is, but and I like to end here. What if 2020 isn't canceled? What if 2020 is the year we've been waiting for? A year so uncomfortable, so painful, so scary, so raw that it finally forces us to grow. A year that screams so loud, finally awaking us from our ignorant slumber. A year we finally accept the need for change, declare change, work for change, become the change. A year we finally band together instead of pushing each other further apart. 2020 isn't canceled, but rather the most important year of them all. And this was Orlando Bloom. So I want to thank everyone for sacrificing your time to be here. I want to say to everyone, thank you, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll pick up our conversation next month, July 17th, where our topic is intersectionality, living as a Black woman. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.